Hi, everyone. Just to give everyone a little bit of context and background. I've had the pleasure of backing some of the leading companies in the space, in the cellular agriculture space, and also having worked with many others as well. Most recently, we've started Cell Valley Labs, which several actually of the speakers today, including Novel Farms or Billion, are actually presenting. And they're over in Cell Valley Farms, which is actually a subsidiary of Wild Earth, which is kind of interesting, a pet food company that also has a science incubator underneath. I have also backed, I was the first investor in Memphis Meats, Finless Foods, first personal investor in Shiok Meats, and several others, including Mission Barns. And so, you know, I have kind of a broad perspective on the industry. And today, what I'd like to share is actually some very simple slides, but really more focused on conversations. And so I would highly encourage people to ask questions, Ahmed. So I think what we'll do is a brief kind of presentation, because I think we have about 20 minutes. And so maybe about a 10-minute presentation. I would love to talk about these concepts. So I'm going to talk about concepts that I think actually might be a little surprising for some people. So I thought I'd talk about that. And first, just to start off, acknowledging the period of time that we're in. I'm calling this the Great Acceleration. So we're seeing an acceleration of all things across our society, and cellular agriculture is just one of them, right? So we came into this going into recession thinking, maybe this might be the end of the funding that we've seen for cell ag companies, and it's turned out to be the opposite, right? We've seen a flourishing of cell ag companies across the world. And that's a really exciting trend, right? And so I just wanted to jump straight into cellular agriculture and the great acceleration. And I want to start where we're ending. Oh, let me go back here. There we go. The end is nigh, right? So the end of animal agriculture, for those of you that have not read the Rethink X report, I highly recommend it. I've talked about it in the past. I think it's actually one of the most interesting reports about cellular agriculture that we've had over the last, I guess, the last 2 years, 3 years. So essentially, the Rethink X report reports that about the majority of dairy and cattle farms will collapse by 2030. I think it's about a 90% extinction by 2035, right? So about 10 years, about a decade. And what we've seen is these predictions seemed outlandish when this publication came out a little over a year ago. And now actually they've been happening, right? So over the last year, even before this period of kind of COVID time, we saw dairy farms starting to go bankrupt. It's the beginning of the disruption, and it's actually happening driven by plant-based products. So plant-based dairy, we recently saw Oatly become a unicorn. So an oat milk company raised $200 million, became a $2 billion company. Which got me thinking a lot about what are the effects of these disruptions, right? What happens when, animal ag industries lose revenue? Let's say they lose $1 billion. Where does that go, right? And we've seen at least some of that goes to some of these alternative companies. At the moment, it's plant-based. We're going to see more recombinant and cell-based companies as they start to come online. And so I want us to start with 2030. 2030 in my mind is around the corner, it's in motion, and it's happening. So I don't believe there will be any slaughterhouses. I don't believe animal ag will exist in the next decade. And I think we're going to see it accelerate. And I think that's something that I really wanted to focus on, because I wanted to talk about what happens after. So I want everyone to rethink cellular agriculture. It's not about meat. So I know a lot of people are like, well, it's meat, it's meat, it's meat, it's meat. I actually love meat. I don't eat meat, I'm plant-based, but I love meat. I've eaten, I guess I'm a post-vegan because I've eaten cell ag products. Most recently, Shiok's shrimp soup and buns. But this is not about meat. This is about so much more, right? And what do I mean about this is not about meat and this is so much more? Cells, tissues, and organs are the most advanced technologies on this planet. So I want everyone to start really thinking more about just the cells, right? So when Memphis meats or most of meats first got started, it was really just about um, about the animal cells to make a hamburger, right, or a meatball. Um, and it's about so much more than that. That is the beginning of this technology, which is incredibly deep, right? And so as we start to get more sophisticated, and I think we're going to hear from a couple of panelists who are talking about scaffolds and how we grow tissues, eventually we will get to the point where we can actually engineer these complex tissues, which could have functions too, right? So if we look at IntegriCulture, the Colnet system, right? So for those of you that are not familiar with IntegriCulture, IntegriCulture was started by Yuki and his team in Tokyo, Japan. And what they do is they actually do co-culturing. So they essentially create almost like complementary organ systems within the bioreactor system, which actually means that you don't necessarily have to use fetal bovine growth serum. So it's going beyond that, but it's going beyond that because they're using a principle which is almost organ-like. This is really the beginning, and we're going to see a lot more of that. And so, in my mind's eye, I'm already in 2030, and I'm looking back at what we've developed, and I think that we're going to see cells. Yes, we're going to grow every type of cell that you can imagine. We're going to have cellular ag companies in every single country. These will be industries within those countries, and each individual country. So when people see a cell ag company in the UK like Higher Stakes, that is going to be one of many that makes up an industry in the UK. And so that's the direction of motion. But we're going to see so much more, right? We're going to see tissues. We're going to see steaks. We're going to see chicken breasts. We're going to see, in Israel, we're going to see organs, whole organs, and we'll be doing some really interesting stuff like that. And so that really is kind of new types of technology that are coming and they're on the way and they're being developed. It's also much more than just animal cells. I think that we really focus in cell ag around, the animal cells. Very few people are talking about plant tissue culture. What do I mean by that? Plant tissue culture, turns out you can actually culture plant cells too. So, I've been able to actually back one or two of the early plant tissue culture companies. One of them is called Gali. It's not in our food field, but they actually grow cotton buds without the plant, right? So they grow cotton without the plant. And so you can actually culture plant cells. So imagine culturing strawberries without the plant, strawberry cells, or orange peel, creating orange peels, but without the oranges. And so these are the types of things that we're going into. Cell culture is a vast area. These are platform technologies. So first, we need to get there. So there are multiple companies working on algae, and algae as a platform for new products. There are many fungal companies. So fungal companies are both focused on creating meat replacements. So Atlas Foods, which I had the pleasure of trying their bacon, it actually was incredible because it was a structured product. So it gave me a little glimpse of the future of cell ag bacon, including the types of actually meat-based products. It actually had structure, so you could pull it. It felt very meat-like, but it was mushroom, right? And then also bacterial as well. So obviously companies like Geltor or Perfect Day that are using both bacterial and yeast-based fermentation to make different types of animal proteins. These are actually all part of the process. And so each one of these technologies are platforms. And it's really important. I want to get people to start thinking about these platforms as places where we build, and we build new technologies, right? We can engineer on top of these technologies. And so that's where I want everyone to be thinking in terms of where our industries are going. These are platform technologies. And I wanted to just go back to, well, what does this mean? So for every $1 billion loss, as we talked about in the beginning, right? We're back to 2030, right? We're staring backwards from 2030. For every $1 billion loss in the animal ag industry, those dollars go somewhere. Those consumer dollars go somewhere. And so for every $1 billion you lose, even if it's not a 1-for-1, those dollars go somewhere else. And so when you see a sunset industries, those industries, as they go down, are actually fueling the rise of new types of companies. That's why we're seeing the explosion of valuation of all of these companies, right? If we're talking about 2 trillion in revenue, 2 trillion in revenue, you know, every $1 billion drop means we've probably birthed several unicorns. And for those of you that are not familiar with the term unicorn from a business perspective, a unicorn is a company worth $1 billion or more, right? So for technology companies, it's not unusual for a technology company, and biology is a technology. It's not unusual for technology companies to be worth 10x revenue. So for every $100 million in revenue, you create a $1 billion company potentially, right? So a $1 billion drop might create 10 unicorns in the future of food space, in the cellular ag space. It's doing that now in the plant-based space. So I think what we're going to see is we're going to see the birth of multiple plant-based unicorns. Oatly was one of them. Beyond Meat was one of them. We have many more coming. I'm sure Possible Foods is already there privately, but when it's public, it'll be obvious that it's a multi-billion-dollar company. But we're going to see that in every category, down every aisle in the grocery store, where there are replacements for animal products. We are going to see a unicorn created from the disruption of those markets, right? And so I was talking to some plant-based founders yesterday about what they're seeing, and I've been able to back some really incredible plant-based founders, including the founder of Notco. For those of you not familiar with Notco, the Knot company is one of the leading plant-based companies in Latin America. So they actually they've created the meat behind the Rebel Whopper. It's the Latin American version of the Impossible Whopper. It's incredible, right? He's disrupting every single category, and that's what's coming next with cellular ag. So I just wanted to give everyone a glimpse of that. We're going to see more change in the next 10 years than we've seen the last 10,000 years. You know, food is a technology, right? I just want to repeat that. Food is a technology. That means we will have a version 1, version 2, version 3, version 4, version 5. We've seen that with some of the plant-based companies with Beyond and Impossible. But we're going to see that in all sorts of ways. So I want everyone thinking about, from the perspective of 2030, looking backwards, we are going to see in the next decade, we're all hopefully going to live that long, we will be part of the changes that are coming, right? Sometimes it feels that things move too slowly. Typically, we overestimate how much progress we can make in a year and underestimate how much progress we can make in a decade. And so this decade is going to be filled with biotechnological acceleration like we've never seen. And so, you know, really think about cellular ag as platforms. These cells are incredibly deep technologies themselves. Just a simple cell is an incredibly deep technology, and it's a platform. And so we will see improvements in the platform itself, the cells, the tissues we create, and eventually more complex things that might actually look like organ systems. And so think about how you can take the technology that you're developing and move and accelerate with that over the next 10 years. You will create commercial products. Many of you that are actually here on this call will probably over the next decade build billion-dollar companies, billion-dollar plus companies. Some of you will fail and try again, and maybe you'll do it on your second or third or fourth time, or join one of these companies, right? So this is going to be a really exciting time. I'm really looking forward to all the talks that are happening later today. And I just wanted to open things up for a little Q&A as well.